going slow. Dwarf Fortress. Okay. Here come the rope reeds, baby. Finally. Mid-autumn. Thing going pretty smooth. Let's just do something else here, I guess. Do we really need quinoa? I don't think we do. Let's get celery instead. Can I build 6x4? Not there. Why not? I pressed something. That's good. Okay. This is rope reed also? Yeah, I remember doing that now. Cranberry, melon. was it 2 or 3? 2. Okay, we got stone. We're making bedrooms or something. Surprised they're mining here first. There's twos all over the place, I think. this one hostile, it can't get to us. We could probably beat him even if he could, but he can't. Well, looks like some rope roots got collected and moved. Oh, this got dug. Oh, I needed it to dig more. Needed to dig to here, actually. What is with this nonsense? All good. Wow, I can't believe this is filling up. I got so many berries. It's awesome. Make another kitchen. Because why not? Quinoa. Yeah. That was just building up. We're not even growing cave wheat anymore. I think we need to. Okay. Should I make more tombs? Could. gems. Oh, okay, that's not really the most important thing, actually. Which siltstone do we really have? Because I've been using a lot of it. Yeah, whatever, let's just go for it. Okay. Outline path. Weird. Oh, the suspend manager actually works. It's pretty nice. It's nice when things do what they say they're gonna do. Oh yeah, I gotta do this. Let's just, I don't know. How much? 56, so we can go. We can bump this up to 18 is what we can do. We can also do this. Just fucking do that. And it looks like we've got enough cassiterite to make bronze. There we go. Okay. Do we want to watch some YouTube? Maybe?
Subscribe, and together we'll uncover pyramid-shaped Egypt civilization. Subscribe, and together we'll uncover secrets from the past written in stone. With a new and profound understanding of how the Great Pyramid shaped Egypt's civilization, it's time to look close. Khufu was so bold with his fully accessible pyramid. I am thrilled with how many people welcomed this new idea in the comments, and I commend you for advancing the discussion to a more sophisticated analysis of the pyramids. For anyone new to the channel, I recommend watching my last video on the Great Pyramid to get up to speed on where the research is now headed. However, you can expect Egyptologists to ignore or downplay the discovery as much as possible. Human nature is sadly quite predictable when it comes to matters of self-interest and self-importance. On that note, in this video, we will examine the psychology of self-preservation for the ancient Egyptians. We shall use the pyramids as evidence for what their priorities really were. The security of a tomb was a big concern in ancient Egypt once people started including valuable items in their burials. It created the incentive to disturb the dead, and thus affluent Egyptians needed to weigh the risks and benefits to having precious belongings interred with them. In early dynastic mastabas, there was a hierarchy of protection, whereby material goods were stored in magazines in the outer section of the mastaba. The body of the deceased received greater protection below ground and in the center of the structure. But these outer storerooms proved too easy to plunder, and thus eventually this design was abandoned in favor of keeping fewer grave goods closer to the body of the deceased. Egyptologist Reg Clark observes this change, writing, quote, "Concomitant with these changes, a noticeable increase in the space allocated to cult purposes becomes discernible at Saqqara, perhaps reflecting a change."
This might be bad. Okay, this might get ugly. I don't know. Should I just make another squad right now? I don't have a captain of the guard squad. Wow. I can't make another one. They don't even have enough stuff as it is. Well, at least we got the animals underground now, so they're safe. We can pretty much just hunker down. Out here. Snatcher. Another one. Third Snatcher. Fourth Snatcher. They're not getting in though. Oh. My dudes. They're attacking when they shouldn't be. Fucking Snatcher's gotta set up position. Partial trance. Oh, that's a militia captain. She's got nothing. She doesn't even have a fucking weapon. Yeah, she's dead. Why do they always do this? Okay, I just gotta have these guys on train. Yeah. Probably my fault. One of those squads was closer to being ready than the other. I should have stationed one down here, maybe. Should there even be a door there? Now, what am I thinking? I have auto cheese on. Why doesn't it? I don't know why they don't make cheese. Wonder. Okay. I assume that's gonna do it. They gotta have some barrels that are full. Okay, there they are. Oh wait, I never did the most important thing. I guess one of them got entombed.
change in an aspect of the superstructure's role, from part secure storehouse for grave goods to part chapel for the reception of offerings. End quote. This framework allows us to evaluate what made the Great Pyramid truly great, and to speculate about the reasoning which led to the decision to build the greatest wonder of the ancient world. I am personally reluctant to rely upon textual evidence of religious practices that come hundreds of years after the Great Pyramid. Of course, there is some good background knowledge there, but I find actions always speak louder than words. No matter what anyone claims their spiritual beliefs are, the actions of people are far more revealing about what their value system really is. In that context, I have always been struck by the enormous stockpiles of jars and vessels that are found in storerooms of Old Kingdom mastabas. Some of these structures had more than 100 antechambers, each stuffed to the brim with provisions for the afterlife. This is not a practice modern cultures engage in for burials, despite it being much easier to manufacture pottery in the present day. Therefore, it seems like an expensive ritual by the standards of antiquity. The only comparison to the present is hoarding, the kind you find in a survival bunker built to withstand war or the apocalypse. Consequently, these mountains of provisions for the afterlife don't come across as spiritual to me. They seem quite practical, and they have a smell about them that cannot be ignored. It's a smell everyone will recognize, and that smell is fear. The eternal afterlife is a very, very long time, and clearly the ancient Egyptians were concerned about running out of supplies in the underworld. Observing this fear of scarcity is important because it reveals there were constraints on the spiritual beliefs of ancient Egyptians and the superstitions that come with them. If spiritual magic could solve all their problems, they wouldn't need mountains of vessels to keep them sustained after death. One eternally refillable cup would be plenty, or maybe a dozen jars, each with a different favored beverage. But the extreme hoarding of provisions reveals a negotiation between superstition and reality. It shows that quantity still mattered for the religious transfer of sustenance to the afterlife. The belief that after death one relies upon provisions from the world of the living is a deep philosophical conundrum. For the rulers of ancient Egypt, it must have been considered a great paradox of their time. The ancients would have noticed an unbreakable pattern since their great civilization began, and this pattern would intensify as the grandeur of burials grew. No matter how powerful a pharaoh became, no matter how beloved his reign was, no matter his conquests or achievements, once he's dead, the next king in the line of succession becomes everyone's priority. Sure, a recently deceased pharaoh would be well cared for and have plenty of stored provisions and frequent offerings from those who knew and worshipped him. But over time, this attention would diminish, for it can only be expected that the tangible rewards for worshipping a living king are greater than those for worshipping a dead one. Thus, the older a burial was, the less attention and protection it received, and so eventually it would fall victim to plundering by people who neither remembered nor cared about the former greatness of the deceased. The early dynastic Egyptians attempted to thwart this pattern of neglect by making mastabas a fortress of material obstruction and stuffing them to the brim with offerings. But no matter how massive the mastaba was, these mountains of earth could not stop intrusions if the burials were unattended by the living. Seeing this pattern would torment any pharaoh planning for a plentiful afterlife, and all their thought would be bent upon it. It is this concern that incentivized King Djoser of the Third Dynasty to build an enormous burial complex in stone. Djoser selected the site of Saqqara, which was already revered in ancient Egypt, and constructed a walled fortress for his resting place. Here, the first pyramid ever constructed was built in no less than 6 iterations, demonstrating a rapidly evolving idea of what a necropolis could be. This limestone city of the dead may have been the biggest spectacle of its time, and no doubt Djoser was pleased with the attention it brought as he continued to expand and build upon it. It seems likely Djoser was ultimately buried somewhere in the many shafts and chambers around his pyramid, but only a historian's fallacy will assert this oversized granite box must have been his final resting place. The unique complex of Djoser would never be replicated by another pharaoh, but the concept of a pyramid became a symbol of enduring attention and veneration. The next pharaoh to successfully complete a pyramid was Snefru, first king of the 4th dynasty. He builds 3 enormous pyramids, and all of them have chambers that might have been intended for a burial. The internal layout of Snefru's pyramids all have lower chambers that could be easily accessed, and a single upper chamber that was much better protected. The common denominator is each pyramid is seeking a balance between allowing people to enter while keeping a separate area more private. The ultimate example of this is the Bent Pyramid, which abandons the idea of a permanently sealed upper chamber by connecting a tunnel to it afterwards and leaving a portcullis open to facilitate access. After Snefru, Khufu builds the Great Pyramid, and his innovative portcullis allows a physically secure burial chamber that can be opened so that offerings may be brought directly to him. As this pyramid is the earliest one with a sarcophagus, it could have been the first pyramid to receive the body of a pharaoh. As the son of Snefru, Khufu would have noticed a pattern about the numerous pyramids his father had constructed. He would have observed that no matter how restricted or sacred these pyramids were, people in Egypt with wealth or influence would endeavor to have a look inside for themselves. Sure, there were impressive temples and statues to inspire awe, and those would have been visited as well. But the pyramids, well, the pyramids were something else. The pyramids were truly divine, something that would attract people to them like nothing else before. So despite whatever privilege was required for someone to enter, the less privileged would seek to bribe their way inside with whatever offerings were required. This is not speculation, because we can observe this pattern throughout history. To this very day, most of Egypt's tourism revenue comes from visitors to the pyramids. Observing the unique power of a pyramid to eternally draw attention is what inspired Khufu to build bigger and grander than ever before. The Great Pyramid would be so magnificent that he could ensure the offerings would never cease and his prosperous afterlife would be secured. Naysaying academics will claim they already knew this and insist there's no reason Khufu would need offerings brought directly within his burial chamber. They'll say the Egyptians had false doors and that these spiritual portals could transport the pharaoh to his offerings as necessary. This is the type of thinking one would expect from a priest, but the mindset of a pharaoh is something different. We can all recognize in the present day that for those who possess the most wealth, there is no extravagance which will not be pursued. There are seemingly no limits to human desire, and just because a false door could work doesn't mean it would be good enough. The subject of false doors is important to consider, so let's examine them in pyramids. The 3 pyramids which follow the Great Pyramid all have false doors carved directly in front of their portcullises. False doors are the only decoration carved into 4th and most 5th dynasty pyramids, and thus they must have been of the highest importance. But just like the mountains of jars found inside of mastabas, there were constraints on how effective Egyptians thought false doors could be. Why else would Menkaure need 30 of them in his vestibule and totally covering his sarcophagus? If magic can solve any problem, you don't need so much redundancy. Whether it's piles of jars or a parade of false doors, the pharaohs of Egypt were attempting to make access to provisions as easy as possible. In that context, it's no wonder that having a fully accessible burial chamber would be the ultimate accomplishment. The limits of false doors and stored provisions are made irrelevant because room service is now available. Let's compare this idea to what else has been proposed by some Egyptologists. Here is Zahi Hawass explaining what he thought Pharaoh Djoser was planning for in the afterlife.
For the afterlife, that the king has to go through these tunnels and having knives in his hand, killing the wild creatures until he can actually go and meet Osiris.
I'll throw out my own wild speculation that the richest, most pampered individuals in ancient Egypt did not plan for fighting wild beasts in their eternal afterlife. I don't know what propaganda gave Hawass this idea, but the physical evidence within pyramids suggests comfort and companionship was the goal for the deceased. You don't find piles of knives and spears in the storerooms of Egyptian burials. You find furniture and vessels for food and drink. As mentioned earlier by Reg Clark, Old Kingdom mastabas evolved towards a place where offerings would be brought rather than stored, and it only makes sense to evaluate pyramids in that same context. But if you think of the Great Pyramid as an oversized and poorly conceived hiding place for a body, it's no wonder you find yourself quite confused.
The ironic thing about a pyramid is it secures the royal burial within, and yet it advertises the royal burials right here.
I hope you will never tire of hearing sound bites like that one, because there are nearly as many as there are stones in the pyramids. The Great Pyramid outshined every Old Kingdom pyramid which came after it, although they all sought the same goal of creating a place where worship and offerings would never cease. Like so many innovations, the first version is a proof of concept. If it works properly, then later designs get simplified and streamlined. Notably, the only chamber design from the Great Pyramid which persists through the end of the Old Kingdom is the triple portcullis. It represents the ultimate accomplishment of keeping the deceased pharaoh as well cared for as possible.
The Great Pyramid, although it's the classic pyramid in the popular imagination, is actually the most unusual. It's a huge anomaly.
Egyptologist Mark Lehner is incorrect for many reasons, but what he really misses is the ancient Egyptians would have the same reaction to the Great Pyramid as we do today. There's something special about being the first to innovate an accessible pyramid, as well as being the largest ever built. However, being the greatest of all time did come with some unpredictable side effects. What Khufu accomplished, which nobody had done before, is that even after his death, the Great Pyramid would have been the main attraction. The psychology of this is undeniable, and it resonated for thousands of years. It's even represented today by the highest ticket price for entering a pyramid. Prior to the Great Pyramid, a living pharaoh could always count on being number one, despite the accomplishments of his predecessors. But after a few generations, one wonders how pharaohs would have responded to living in the shadow of greatness. Perhaps some would resent the Great Pyramid as a monument which siphoned off attention from their own divinity. This may explain some of the peculiar effects that had befallen Khufu's legacy. Perhaps it's why the Great Pyramid is the only pyramid with its summit flattened, because someone wanted to take it down a notch. Perhaps it's why later accounts of Khufu from Herodotus are quite negative, because stories were fabricated to ruin his reputation. Perhaps it's why we find a stolen relief of Khufu inside the burial chamber of Pharaoh Unas. And perhaps it's why no statues of Khufu ever survived, except for this miniature carving which Flinders Petrie miraculously saved. Egyptologist John Romer thinks this occurrence is purely random.
Why is this the only thing that remains of Khufu?
It's just chance. All of ancient Egypt, what's left is just chance. You get one king, you get 100 statues, you get the guy who makes the Great Pyramid, you end up with this.
However, I have my suspicions that in drawing so much attention to himself, Khufu's legacy was forever complicated by the incentive to one-up him by later pharaohs. Another interesting question is how the practice of bringing offerings directly to a burial chamber within a pyramid might evolve over time. The logistics of opening and closing a portcullis are not simple, and so perhaps some compromises were made so that full entry into a pyramid was not always required. This may explain the vestibules that start with the Pyramid of Menkaure. They are small rooms at the bottom of the entrance passage where offerings could be made without passing the portcullis and into the burial chamber. From the Pyramid of Menkaure onwards, there are also small storage magazines deeper inside the pyramid. Perhaps more permanent belongings could be kept there and attended to on a less frequent basis. This of course raises the question, where were belongings stored in the Great Pyramid? But the Great Pyramid's portcullis was more maneuverable than any other, and I wonder if Khufu thought he wouldn't need anything permanently stored with him. Perhaps he was even a true philosopher king, and only wished for food and companionship in the afterlife. After all, treasures are of little comfort if you are alone and starving in the underworld. While much of these ideas are speculative, there is a way we can objectively evaluate what the ancient Egyptians thought about permanently accessible pyramids. Eventually, the pyramid party was over, and Old Kingdom Egypt ended with the death of Pharaoh Pepi II. The centralized government of Egypt collapsed, and civil war and chaos would persist for at least a century. It is this time, known as the First Intermediate Period, when it is presumed most pyramids were abandoned. But as Pepi II was the last pharaoh to reign over the whole nation, it should be expected that some centralized power would still protect his pyramid complex longer than his predecessors. The cult of Pepi II would have some legacy resources before Egypt was fully engulfed in chaos. So, what did the cult of Pepi II do as they realized other pyramids were being abandoned? They took drastic action to make the pyramid permanently sealed. The chapel around the north entrance was removed, and a large belt of stones was constructed around the entire pyramid. These blocks were at least 6.5 meters wide, and a minimum of 2 courses tall against the casing stones. This belt would have camouflaged the entrance and made it more physically secure than any other pyramid. Even the enclosure walls had to be moved to accommodate this belt of stone. Egyptologist Gustave Jecquier thought this belt of stone was to somehow prevent the pyramid from collapsing. No physical evidence was presented to support this idea, nor is it clear to me how such a belt of stone would be intended to stabilize the pyramid in any way. Of the destroyed chapel at the pyramid's entrance, Jecquier writes, quote, "There is every reason to believe that a new chapel was built in the same place, but I have not been able to find the slightest vestige of it." End quote. I have one good reason to believe that a new entrance chapel was never constructed, because this modification represents the change from accessible pyramids to permanently closed ones. The final gambit of Pepi II's pyramid shows us exactly how ancient Egyptians would go about permanently sealing a burial. In that context, the pyramids before Pepi II seem intended for continued access, and so the dream of Khufu persisted until civilization could no longer protect him. The question of how often pyramids were fully entered by their worshippers may be endlessly debated, but clearly it was not a token amount. Otherwise, Pepi II would not have been the only pharaoh to modify a permanent closure once the dream of eternal worship faded away. The ancient Egyptians may have entered pyramids daily, weekly, yearly, or only once in a generation. But whatever the frequency was, it's what the physical evidence shows the pyramids were designed for. The alternative is to claim the pyramids were complete failures. From the earliest pyramids of Snefru to the final pyramid of the Old Kingdom, Egyptologists have proclaimed these pyramids were collapsing to explain their anomalies. They see failure every step of the way, and this is a great shame. In fact, when the Old Kingdom ended and the dream of pyramids was shattered, perhaps the pharaohs and their belongings were interred elsewhere out of sight. Maybe this is why mummy fragments have been so conspicuously absent from the pyramids. Maybe this is why Herodotus proclaimed the Giza pyramids were not the final resting place of the pharaohs. Perhaps every robber's tunnel found a completely emptied pyramid, and perhaps Egyptology has overlooked that the ancient Egyptians were far more clever than we ever imagined. Thanks to everyone who watched this video to the end. Please subscribe to the channel to see more of this content. Give a like or comment as you see fit, and above all, remember to ask your friends if they take their history for granted.
Now we've finished the record player case, now we can spend some time on the actual turntable itself. Now this BSR UA15
Let's just watch part 1 first.
And this time in the workshop, I've got a little project in. I've been asked to restore a Colster Brands KP36 record player. It's about 50 years old, it's made in Kent, England, in a horrible green drab colour. Oh! The customer wants me to turn it blue, and it's given me free rein to do whatever I like with the rest of it. It's probably a good idea to see if this thing works. Always intriguing. Hopefully hoping no smoke comes out if I turn it on. Oh, I can hear humming. That's encouraging. An amplifier's working, an early transistor one in this case. I can hear a motor going, which is also not terrible, but there's no motion here at all. Doesn't seem to be right. Another thing to check is that the cartridge, if there's any noise. I'm not surprised very much. Often these things are dead, these early crystal cartridges. So, on with the teardown. Well, the lid's got to come off first. Luckily it's just held in with screws. But these hinges do look rather rusty. I'll have to see if I can save those later. There's usually not many screws holding these things together, and they're always flat blades of the vintage. It's a good idea to pull these off now. These are the cables to the motor. There's no connector on these, so the best way to deal with this, I found, is just cut them off. They're close to the ends, because you need to, if you leave a bit of the original wire on, you don't make mistakes as to what colour wire went where. Try and get in there. And the black and the brown.
I don't have any tables in here.
We're free. This will be a BSR UA16 or UA15, classic and typical, very common British record player. Next part is to deal with this electronics. We need to get all that old beautiful amplifier. I've just seen it's built on an old tag board. That's really nice. Can't wait to get my hands on it. I think to get this top off, I think the knobs are going to have to come off. Always an awkward part, this. Although it's not too bad. Oh, these aren't too bad to get off.
I mean, 8.
So that's the amplifier there. Oh, another screw I see there. Cable.
Okay, I'm already making cloth rope, so we'll go to that way.
This is a novel thing. I've never seen this for speaker mounts. I think they're just like rubber nuts by the looks of it. As we already know, this speaker works, so let's not destroy it in the restoration process. An interesting colour, this. Just going to remove the carry strap now. Just a couple of nuts, not too bad to get off. Don't forget the washers.
Oh wait.
There we are, a strap. Oh, this front grill's glued on. Oh, this isn't going to go well. Well, I don't like it very much anyway, and it's a bit corroded and scratched. Yeah, it's definitely scrapped now. Yeah. There we have it. It's actually a BSR UA15 SS3. Told you they look familiar, didn't I? This is going to need a good strip down, a good clean. All the old grease is going to have turned into sort of sticky tar and gum this all up. That'll be most of its problems. Hopefully there's not too much wrong. There isn't normally much wrong with these things. So that's the teardown complete.
Jeez,
This is the
when
worst
done.
part of any record player restoration, getting that old wreck scene off. Some parts just fall off and other bits really fight you. Even this foam's glued down, blimey. I summarise this technique as stab, gouge and rip. Oh, watch your fingers, Mark. When it's really stuck on, best to sand it off, honestly. Now we've done all the sanding, so what I need to really address is to see if there's any damage to the wood. A piece of the plywood's actually broken off, so it's not too much of a problem, but I think I am going to repair that, splice a bit more timber in. It's also delaminating in the odd place, so just inject some glue where it's not looking too good. Try and inject some glue under this gap where it's where the glue's failed in this plywood. It's not a particularly smart way of doing it. I think you just got to try and sort of stuff the glue in there as best as you can. Probably doesn't need much glue really. Okay.
Okay.
And the same story in this part here. This corner's also got a bit delaminated. Not so bad for the others. We're trying to get a bit of glue in there. It's almost worth breaking it a bit more, just so we can get some glue in it. That's it. That's got some in. Okay. Leave that to set for a bit. To address this little bit that's missing here, rather than try and cut a piece out of the bandsaw, I'm just going to use a bit of like pine veneer. I'll just cut that out there. How to find the end? I think it's about there, so it's going to want to follow this grain anyway, so might as well just cut it like that. There we are. Fairly nice job. Just smear a little bit of glue on there, don't need a lot. Just spread that with this little, whatever, this palette knife I think this was. Did have a set of them, but this is all that's left. Then another bit of glue on top of that. A nice job, I think. Get the excess off, otherwise I'll glue it to the clamps. I found that out because I've glued many things to my clamps. Just clean all the glue off everything. Worst part about the wood filler is it stinks, but it's a two-part thing. You mix two bits together and it goes off quite quickly, does the job. Let's just get this done. Now, it's got some rather strange instructions. It tells you on here to take a piece of the wood filler out the size of a golf ball. Well, I don't want a golf ball, I mean. And then pour 50 to 70 millimeters in length of the hardener. Looks like we're going to be guessing. Hardener, but it's not gone hard already. Let's get this stinky stuff open. Whoa. Ooh, goopy. It's not set rock hard yet, so that's encouraging. And I'm going to say that that's plenty. And it's nowhere near a golf ball. So I'm going to pour nowhere near 50 to 75 mil. I think that's it. A guess. Might have my work cut out doing this. These pads, by the way, are brilliant. A friend of mine showed me these pads are used, and they're great for mixing things on because they're like waterproof, like they're greased or something, like plastic sheets. And when you're done with it, you just peel it off, and you've got a new layer. Onion board, it's called. And I think for what we need, because we're going to cover it, it's as simple as that, really. The lid's got the exact same damage on it, so I'm going to do the exact same treatment. I've made this little plan as to what I'm going to do for the pattern on this record player. I'm going to use the blue and white Rexine patterns to generate what is a nice sort of 60s retro style.
Oh, that's
Rexine
nice.
I've got this nice blue sort of Rexine, which quite still get hold of it. And also this is actually wallpaper, but it's got a nice sort of pattern similar to some Rexine I've seen before. But it's together it looks damn good, so I'm going to get on with it. I'm going to start with the lid, because the lid's generally quite a nice easy place to start. Get your eye in with how to lay this Rexine on. Brush on a nice even layer of PVA glue, great for sticking this down with. Try not to get any creases or air bubbles underneath this. It's a bit of an art. I find it easier just to trim these as I go along. Well, did I say I make it up as I go along? Probably true. Corners can be really fiddly. Never quite know what to do with them. One of the things to realise here is that you're actually covering up all of the little screw holes in the case. They can be quite hard to find again after you've covered it. The inside of the lid can be quite difficult because it's the back of the hardboard, it's all very sort of absorbent and lots of little dimples in there, so you need to put a lot of glue. You need extra care not to get any wrinkles in the Rexine on the inside. And same again, just wash it down in PVA glue. Damn it, chasing those pesky air bubbles out. Get them all to the edge, that's the key. It's always best to do the inside corners separately. Use little pieces and just trim them to the exact size. Always get a better result that way. The bottom is ever so slightly curved, so I'm having to put little cuts in the Rexine just so it overlaps. Attention to detail. Before the glue dries completely, best to trim it to the exact size you want right now. The rough bits will just wipe off with a rag, I hope. The inside of the case is awkward to work on, so definitely do the corners first. I'm doing this inside in white. The sides are definitely the hardest part to do. Now that the case is well underway, it's time to turn some attention to the ugly knobs on this thing. Really not a fan. I'm going to add some aluminium discs to them and dome them. It's going to really make these look a lot nicer. To save myself getting in some trouble later on, when I put these discs in, I'll probably need to take them in and out a few times to get them spot on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a hole through the centre of here, so I can actually poke something up there to push the discs out if I need to. I'm going to make the domes out of this thin aluminium. It's 0.5mm thick, it's easy to work with. To cut the holes, I'm going to use these hole punch sets. These are dead easy to use. And to dome it, I'm going to use this doming punch set and just mash it in there. I'll show you. Put the punch in. It's very hard. And we're through. Perfect. Nice job. Now we take this this block for lots of size different like semicircles or spheres. And we'll use the biggest one on here. We'll put our disc inside. Get the punch on there. Just give it a few taps. Just work the tool around. And there we have a lovely dome. Just needs to be polished up now. Trying hard not to burn my fingers whilst doing this. It gets very hot very fast. And without any doubt in my mind, these make quite a difference. Beautiful. Much better. Bit of chemistry now though, because that aluminium won't stay that shiny for long, it will sort of tarnish and go a dull colour, so it's not to be plated. The problem you've got, something like nickel plating, it won't stick to aluminium, so you've got to first put a layer of zinc on there, and this zincate solution. The zincate strips the aluminium oxide away, it's quite a caustic solution, and then it's depositing this zinc on top, giving it this dull grey colour. You have to wash it off quite a lot, so you don't want to contaminate your next stages with it. The next stage is to plate it with copper, but using an alkaline copper solution which won't rip the zinc off. Once it's got the copper plating on, then you can just plate it with whatever you like. In this case, I'm going to be using nickel. And let's not forget all the other parts as well. They're all a bit manky. And they've got to start off by going in an acid X solution. So this is basically hydrochloric acid. Just get all the grease and just loose parts off. Ready for going in the nickel plating bath. And don't they look good? Almost like chrome. The trouble with the dome shape is you trap an air bubble underneath, so it won't plate the inside of this. It's not a problem though. And here's all the fittings with fresh nickel plating on. Looking good. For the front grille, I'm cutting some decorative steel sheets. I'm just going to polish it up and spray it with a lacquer just to keep it shiny. This is quite an upgrade on the original aluminium horrible grille. So the new grille is just glued on. It's clamped there and left overnight. Next time we'll be sorting out that BSR turntable and putting it all back together. If you want to know how that turns out, catch out the next episode. If you want to know when that's coming out, subscribe. Catch you next time. Deck from the late 60s. When we tested this, it didn't even rotate, so there's something quite wrong. The back is quite simple, really, and I generally just need to strip down and clean off old sticky grease that's seized up, re-lube it, put it back together and see what it's doing. So I can just test it on the bench. I'm just going to bare off the wires that came from the motor. Now there's 4 wires come off. The black and the brown is actually the 230 volts or 240 volts mains. The red and white, this is actually the low voltage output to the transistor amplifier. So we'll leave those disconnected for now. So I'm just going to bare off the ends and then I'm going to connect them to the safe block. So hopefully now we can see what's going on. If I turn that on, well, I can hear the motor running. There's no turning going on at all. So I'm going to fetch the platter off now and see why it's not turning. This has actually got more problems as well. I can't actually move this arm to get it out of the way, so I can't take the actual turntable off. Also, I noticed the tone arm is sort of locked in position, which sort of indicates that the auto changer mechanism is sort of mid-cycle. When the motor's sort of lost drive. So I need to find a way of getting this to sort of creep round and get into the right gearing position. Fortunately, I think I can just turn this, and as I drive this it might find its position. So now I saw the arm has just dropped and I heard a click. Still stuck. Aha. There we go, we found it. Easy fix. So I'm just going to get a screwdriver and flick this circlip out the way. Hope it doesn't fly off too far down the workshop. Oh, that's off. This should just lift off now. But it's a bit stuck. All those years of grease and debris on it. When it's a bit stubborn like this, I find a bit of hot air can be used to heat up the grease and just all these parts. Just warm it up a bit, just gently with a bit of hot air. You don't want to melt the plastic. That's another aspect to this. Straight away we can see part of the problem with this. It is all down to old grease. This is the motor spindle here. This rotates and this drive wheel should be resting against. So I'll put this on a setting. So that should have moved now and been pushed into the wheel like this. So there's a spring here that should push this way, and that's the problem. It's just seized up. So this is the area that primarily needs the repair. If I just put some power onto the motor now, we can see it should drive. So that's rotating now, and that should be pushed against there, and that gives us the drive. So now we know what the initial problem is. We can take that mechanism apart. Let's take the drive wheel off. This is actually in very good condition. It's nice and round and it's still quite soft. Nice. So I mentioned taking this part off. Clean this roller up enough, you find it will turn freely, and if it's turning freely, that's pretty much, that saves you quite a job. I've had these seize up before, but I've had to use heat on it, like a hot air gun, to melt the old grease off, and then try and get some oil into it, hoping that the oil will melt into the grease and sort of reform it into a actual lubricant. This one appears to be quite free, which is good news. I'll just give this a bit of a squirt with the alcohol there. Just leave that to sort of work its way through the mechanism. This is the thrust bearing assembly. You've got two flat sort of washers. There's a rubber washer there as well, and this actual thrust bearing, which is 5 ground balls in a little cage. As you can see, it's full of old congealed grease. So the first thing to attempt to do with this is to actually see if we can lift out some of that thick sludgy grease. And just wipe that off. Isopropyl alcohol seems to be the best thing for cleaning this old grease up with. Hold it down with a screwdriver. Ask you to agree with us. Flip that over. Clean the other side. Making it all together far more pleasant to handle. This is the cam for the auto changer. We'll do the same to this, just clean all the old grease off. Some I've just greased my own hand. Incidentally, I noticed that the outer gear of this, it's not very little lubrication on it at all. There's almost just a little remnant of grease there. That's about it. It's not under high load, this mechanism, so it's probably not too critical, but it's always good to put a little bit of lubrication on it. We'll fit this part back on here. There we go. Clip on. Just give it a little nip. Perfect. We're now looking at the underside of the mechanism for the speed control, which is this little lever here, or this knob here. This moves this around, and that little rubber wheel is under there, and this mechanism here lifts the wheel to different heights. So on that stepped spindle, it engages a different sort of pulley ratio. That bit, as you can see, works okay. What isn't working okay is the way that this is pushed back into it, which is this spring on here. So we give that a clean up. We do that. First of all, take this part off. Just click it off with the pliers. Then there's a little washer and a plastic plug, and then the spring tension unwinds now, so it wants to release. That's just hooked over that mechanism there. Let's take this motor out just to get it out of our way. You can use a pliers or screwdriver to move these circlips off. Don't forget the washers. See if that's giving us, so the motor comes out, see if that's giving us some more room. A little tip I give myself is to actually mark where the springs were attached, so as I pull them out, just to give me a clue where they came from, because there's quite a lot of holes on here, so it can be misleading. That's part of the problem. Now all this mechanism can come apart. A good old cleaning. It's the same theme again. Strip it down, clean the old grease off. Certainly more pleasant putting the nice clean parts back together. Just put the small assemblies back together just to make this a little bit less fiddly. Now as we put these things back together all nice and clean, we just need to put a bit of fresh lubricant on. So I'm going to be using a semi-fluid grease, which stays rather runny. Which is what you sort of want. You don't want to put loads on there. It's pretty mucky stuff. So just around here is where the control arm will go. So we'll just place the control arm on, or whatever it's called. I'm calling it a control arm, just for clarity. We just want to put a little bit of grease just on the sliders there, on these sort of the ramps. Just a bit, not loads, otherwise you make a right mess. Okay, the next part to go on is this part here, which climbs up the little steps. So we'll just put a little bit of grease on here and on there. Hook that into where it came from. Rest that on there. Then there's a little collar that sits around there, this part here, drop that on, and then we engage this mechanism that I just put together a bit earlier. So this part engages, goes over there like underneath, so we just put a bit of grease around just in that hole there and just in there. Just feed that underneath it. Just remember to make it go the right way. This part has to go through there. Tuck it under and it drops on like that. This pin, which is the one that was originally stuck, that has to go in from the underneath of this and slide up. Just going to put a little touch of grease on there, just on the spindle itself. Now the awkward bit, trying to locate where the hole is. There we go. Alright, pop it, come out it pops. Okay, so far so good. So this is all sort of put up together and nicely lubricated. Next part that goes on is the spring. So this arm, which is the wheel that drives on this, so we have to push the arm. The arm needs a spring force pushing it this way, which is done with this part here. So how this works is I'm going to keep this pin pressed up, so you engage the hook of the spring over there, you push it down onto that spindle, and then what you have to do is turn it a few times to preload it, so you can put a bit of tension on. Probably about 3 or 4 turns. One more. There we go, it's clicked into place. We see here now, this has now got the correct action there, spring loaded. I'm just going to hold on to that. We need to find the little spring clip that came off. Oh, with a cat hair on it. And just clip it under there. Now the motor is, I've seen it's working already, so I'm just going to give this a bit of a dust off really, just to get all the just bits of dust and muck off it. There's not much wrong with it, but what I will do is just lubricate the bearings. They don't seem to be too bad, but it's not very intrusive, just to add just a little drop of oil to this little oiler, and with that one just give it a little spin. You don't want to put a lot of lube on that, because if that gets everywhere, it's because remember this is a frictional drive, so you've got the rubber wheel actually runs against this, you don't want that to be all slippery. And same in the bottom, there's another little bearing there. Just get in there with a little fine needle, just a little drop of oil there. That should keep it going another 50 years, I reckon. That's now good to go back in the chassis. Just turn it over and line the holes up. A washer there, and there, and one there. These rubber mounts don't look in bad condition really. They may have got a bit shorter than they used to be, but I think within range we can still adjust them. So get the circlip on. Oh, I think it's an E-clip actually. I keep calling it a circlip, but whatever these things are. And finally this one. Again, just a little drop of oil on the bush. Put it over the spindle. Wow. I've got the problem where the spring action's working properly. so this part here wants to go all over the place. So that had a little fibre washer. As you can see now, it's not working quite as it should do. Oh, I see the problem. The issue with this wheel flapping about, there's supposed to be a clip there, these seed washer things. That's supposed to engage in a groove just under there. And it'd been ideal to fit that originally. Oh, we pay the price for impatience. So just see if I can just jiggle that on with the pliers. And yes, this screw here is used to adjust the height so that it engages in the correct step on the spindle. But it looks to me like that's 78 on the bottom one. That's near okay. Could do with going down a little bit. think that's spot on. I'm now going to pull the rest of these linkages and levers off the bottom just to give those a clean up. I don't expect too much trouble around this end. It's not normally too troublesome. These bits aren't too dirty at all, actually. This is another part that will need a good clean. Now we've got that exposed, this is the bottom of the auto change mechanism here. It seems to be quite free. They recommend in the service manual not to lubricate this. It's another part that should just run very dry and light. But this is the bottom of the tone arm mechanism here. It'd be a good idea whilst I'm down here just to give this a bit of a light cleaning. See, some of this has got a bit of gunk in there. Just clean it up like all the other parts. It all feels nice and free anyway. It's all nice and clean now. Let's give it the lightest bit of lubrication. And back down in there, where it came from. Yes, not forget this washer that came off here. Just pop that back on, like that. Not to forget to put this little thing in the washer back on. Slide that back underneath. Little pivot it is. There we go. This part's invariably minging old grease all over it. Let that soak for a little few seconds. We'll see what wipes off. Hopefully most of it will just wipe off now. Just seeing some muck on this part here. Not a surprise, this grease is it's probably 60 years old now. So this part, put the little fibre washer back on. tiny bit of grease. Just put the clip back in. Be good to see if I can get a bit of oil in this. Make sure it goes freely so it's soaked down. And more grease before we put this on. So this lives on there in that position. Got to engage on that. We need to just lubricate that. Right, okay. Remember the lubrication points. Just the grease around here. Fresh new grease up on this ramp and around here. Put a bit on around this pivot. Start off, re-engage the spring. This is all quite under a bit of spring tension, this is. Get this on there. Pivot down there. Engage this onto the slot there. A bit more light lube around here. Put the washer on and the screw. There we are. Now we're on the home straight. Just the bearing and the cam. So put the rubber washer on the bottom there. Then put this bottom ring on there. Just the tiniest bit of grease on there. Right, what I need to do with this bearing now is actually put some grease in it. Bit of a mucky job really. Just going to brush some in. They don't need loads. There's probably a specification for exactly how much it needs. I've not read that far. That's probably plenty there. I'm going to drop that on there. Just lightly lubricate this with just what's left on my fingers. And that's the bearing on there. Good. Last messy job now is to lubricate this. Easy to do with a brush. Just brush it around, just like they did in the factory. That's about it. Get a little bit in the bore, so it'll push it just a little bit, because it'll push through with the as we place it on this pin here. Jiggle it about until it sits properly. There we go. Secured with the these circlips. That's a little bit of grease on all the gear teeth there. Before I put it back together, I'm just going to do is make sure, now I've got grease everywhere I want grease, is just make sure that I haven't got grease where I don't want it. So I'm just going to get a bit of alcohol on there and just make sure just everywhere it's free from grease, especially on the inside of the turntable, because this is the friction surface here. Just make sure there's no no grease or anything on here. That should be fine. Place that over the spindle there. Might have to put your hand underneath. Oh no, that seems to have engaged nicely. So I'm just going to pop the circlip back on there. Time for a power test. So that should be the motor on. What's nice is I can't hear it running. 16 RPM, let's go. 33. 45. And 78. The speed select's working going up the gearbox range, not up the range. See how he goes down. 45, 33 and 16. That's looking encouraging. I'm going to put some proper vinyl on this now to see how it sequences with a proper record on there using the auto changer. So I'm going to put this album, this LP on there and just let it go with the auto changer. Fingers crossed. Find the start position. Go on. That looked very good. I can hear it's working. We know the cartridge is knackered already, so well, I'm going to see how it finds the end. See if it cycles. I'll take it to the lead out of the album there. Wind again. It should stop. Happy days. Just got to sort out the cartridge now. These old flip over cartridges are pretty much obsolete, especially these crystal ones. You just can't get them. So this has got to go. And these plugs are a bit fiddly. There we go. It's also a mono cartridge, which of course they were back in the day. Stereo was quite fancy and expensive. But this cartridge has suffered from the typical death. It's got these like crystals in there, like a salt, Rochelle salts I think it's called, and they've over time it's absorbed moisture and it's just killed it. There's just no output out of this. So I'm going to put a modern ceramic cartridge on, which gives similar output, so it'll do the job. But it'll be a stereo cartridge. But this record player's only got a mono amplifier on it, so what I need to do is physically mount the new cartridge and arrange the stereo outputs to give us a nice single mono. That's what we'll try. These are the modern ceramic cartridges that you can buy. They're quite inexpensive and they do the job well, but they are very much, there's no 78 flip over style for them. You can still get those, but they're quite expensive, so in this case for most general record playing these do fine. They've got these plastic mounts, so I'm going to have to work out how to mount that in the original head shell. So now I've got the head shell on the bench upside down. I can take the original bracket out. Uses these tiny little screws. This is quite easily removed. So the next stage is working out how this thing might fit. The first problem is, you can see it's too wide, so there's going to have to be a bit of machining done. I have to have a think about this. After some moments of pondering, it's occurred to me that I'm going to modify this plastic piece to fit. I've looking on there that the back of the cartridge, this part here, oh no, other way around, the back of the cartridge lined up with the holes sits too far back, so I'm going to make the mounting holes nearer to there. Also, this is quite thick, so I'm going to go on the bandsaw. I'm going to chop these off to make it flush. Now we're back from a bit of machining. I've made this slimmer and thinner and put some new holes in, and we'll see how that mounts. But it fits in for a start off, that's encouraging. So I can get those fiddly little screws in. To turn this into a mono cartridge, I've made this little jumper connector. So you just connect from the diagonal, two diagonal pins on these cartridges, and that should do it. That turns into a mono cartridge. Just clip the stylus back in. Okay, fiddly job. So the new cartridge is in. Let's see if it works. I've rigged this up to the oscilloscope, so I'm going to put that album back on and get it going, and we'll see on the oscilloscope what the output is. I mean, I could play it, but we'll play it in a moment. Let's get this going. Brilliant. Right, first time. It's lucky. Well, I'm quite happy with that. That's quite a result. This really is and truly ready to go back in the restored case. Not so fast though. These things do have a reputation. They are known as groove grinders because they have quite a high tracking weight. This thing's behaving well. It's not skating across the record, which is good. But I'm intrigued how heavy it is. We might need to adjust it. If I just stop that there. The tracking weight's adjusted by pulling a spring and just relocating it if we need to. So I'm just going to get some little handy scales designed for the job. So we're in a good position. I'm just going to turn these on. See how heavy it is. Oh, what a surprise. It's over scale. It's very heavy. Well, that's got it a bit nearer to where the modern record player plays. Let's see how it works. It might not track very well. So now we've got the record player working nicely. Just to tidy up the amplifier. Now we already know it works, we heard it sort of humming and buzz, but we can always come back to it if we need to. I'm just going to reconnect the wires basically, and this is some nice old technology. Components are built to last then. An interesting part, this has got an old selenium rectifier, very old. It's still working, so I'm going to leave it in. An interesting little quirk in this is that there's an indicator light, little lens there, and there's a bulb behind it, but it doesn't light up. It doesn't line up. So one of the things I'm going to do, I'm going to move the bulb so it actually shines underneath the indicator lens. Not too deep, don't want to go all the way through. There we go. So I'm just going to warm this one up. This is the red wire. That comes off there okay. I'm just going to place it back on. White wire's a bit more awkward, it's sort of hidden around the back. Just grab hold of it there. That's off. Just bend the wire to suit it a bit better. Oh, bit of a fiddle. Bit of a lot of a fiddle now. And it's on. So that's the low voltage supply that comes from the motor slash transformer arrangement. It's very clever that. That just leaves the mains power, which goes to the motor, which is the brown and black wire. I've also got to put a new mains lead on this, which I'll do afterwards. So I'm going to twist these together in the same way. Another thing I'm just considering on these old record players is that there's no fuse on this. This relies on the plug top fuse. Now I know that we'll put a 3 amp fuse in this, but this record player needs nowhere near that. So I'm considering. It says, in fact, it says on here that it's the switch rating is at 1 amp. So I'm going to see if I can find a fuse, 1 amp fuse to put in line with this, make it a bit safer. How I'm going to sort the fuse out is I'm going to make an arrangement like I've seen on other old record players. We'll actually mount a fuse on the back of the mounting board. So I brought the mounting board over here. I do realise I need to pass the amplifier chassis through here and then sort of get this lined up on there. And just screw that through there. Right, this is all wired up now, got the fuse in, got the mains cable connected, it's all ready to go. I'm going to pop it back in the case now. Got to remember to put the speaker back in this thing, won't make much noise without it. This record player is now back together. I'm really happy with how it's turned out. It's working beautifully. It takes singles, it takes LPs, just as it was intended to. The auto change is spot on as well. Very happy with this. Well, one. I enjoyed it. It's turned out really well. Shame to let it go. Catch you next time.
Oh, the bookkeeper. I should make a library. That's what I need. Where should I put it? No, wait. Leave those. I'll do that. Okay, I gotta start making paper, I guess. save and finish for the night. Magnetite, that's great. Man, there's a lot of finished goods here. That's what happens when you set up those automatically make crafts and shit. Okay, these hives are going up quick. That's good. Does this hive even have bumblebee? No, it's just honeybee. But this is a bumblebee colony. I've never been able to get bumblebees for some reason. Maybe there's a certain type of hive you gotta make? I don't know. Whatever, either way we'll get some honey going. I'll get some mead going. Yeah. Thanks for coming along, everybody, and see you later.